Hello and welcome to Mekelle Foresight. This is Mekelle, producer and host of the show. I'm honored to have as my guest again today on Mekelle Foresight, Dr. Aklilu Hailemichael. I remember the first time I had the honor of hosting you, Dr. Hailemichael, on this show was before the tragic genocidal war that was unleashed against the people of Tigray on November 2020. You had, of course, then a different role. So tell me, what are you doing here in Europe, Dr. Hailemichael? Dr. Aklilu Hailemichael, sorry.
Thank you, Mekelle, for having me again. Thank you for this opportunity for another interview. I remember that interview which we had on my role as the director, as the director of the Tigray Development Association long time ago, before the war. My role now is different. I am the official representative of the government of Tigray in Europe.
So, Europe, okay. That means the government of Tigray has representatives everywhere in the world?
The government of Tigray has representatives in different regions in the world. Actually, right after the war, and slightly before that, the government of Tigray had set up a committee for its diplomatic activities across the world. Well, I have to tell you that I was actually in Tigray when the war broke out. And actually, I'm basically now abroad. And I was a member of the committee that was undertaking diplomatic activities globally, basically in the area of public diplomacy, political diplomacy, diaspora affairs, and also focused on mobilizing humanitarian support to the needy people of Tigray when the war was going on. And at the moment, I'm responsible for issues of Tigray in Europe.
So now you can delve into the specifics of your role because you started off with the, explaining your mission. So what activities, what mission do you carry out as the official representative of the government of Tigray in Europe?
Since the war broke out, the government of Tigray, among others, had a diplomatic wing. We are not a state yet, a recognized state yet. But the government of still had a diplomatic, or you may call it a para-diplomatic wing to make clear to the international community the core interests of Tigray, and also to make sure that the international community gets informed and adopts a fair policy in relation to the conflict imposed on Tigray by the allied forces of many, including Abiy, the government of Eritrea, the government of Amhara forces, the government of Amhara forces, and so on and so on and so on. Initially, actually, it set up one committee, a global committee that had the mission of undertaking diplomatic activities in the area of public diplomacy, political diplomacy, also of engaging our vibrant diaspora, and also mobilizing humanitarian support. Well, particularly from our diaspora, in order to basically support the Tigrayan people in general, and the victims of the war in particular.
So tell me, how do you explain, by the admission of the authorities of the regional government of Tigray, the diplomatic endeavors did not go abreast with the military advancement, that the the diplomatic and political engagements were not at par with the military successes. That's what the assessment seems to have been by the government of Tigray. And you're telling me that the diplomatic front was a success. How do you reconcile both?
Well, first, before addressing this question, I think we had an issue on the humanitarian support, sorry, on the humanitarian support, on the start of the humanitarian situation. There are narratives that state that the humanitarian situation in Tigray, and particularly the access to humanitarian support in Tigray has improved. Well, it depends on how we look at it. It depends on the criteria you use to assess this. If you compare, the humanitarian access to Tigray has been limited since July 12th. That's what I see from the reports of aid agencies that operate in Tigray. Okay, first of all, if you look at the status of humanitarian access in relation to time, that may give you one kind of status. If you look at it in terms of demand of the people of Tigray, it will give you another aspect of the status. Just before the cessation of hostilities was declared in Tigray, and for a couple of months, I can't tell you the exact number of the months, but for a couple of months, Tigray spent a couple of months where a single aid truck did not arrive at all. I'm not talking about weeks and so on. For a couple of months, I don't know, for 4 or 5 months, no single aid truck arrived. But then, after the cessation of hostilities was declared, well, it was announced one after the other by Ethiopian government and also the government of Tigray. Well, there was, this is again relative, there was an improvement in terms of the number of aid trucks that arrived in Tigray. Actually, quite a significant period after the announced cessation of hostilities, no meaningful number of aid trucks arrived in Tigray. But recently, in relative terms, hundreds of aid trucks are arriving every week. In that respect, it is an improvement. An improvement in terms of comparing it to the pre-cessation of hostilities and also the period right after the cessation of hostilities.
But yet it falls short of the it falls short of the precepts of humanitarian aid, despite the number of trucks. Even the government of Tigray, some government officials of the government of Tigray claim or insist on a system of delivery of humanitarian aid and not on the number of trucks. So Are you saying that this improvement uh, is something to be, you know, uh, to see in a positive light?
No, I'm not saying that. Not at all. I am trying to put a perspective on how to assess the scale of improvement. The scale of improvement is relative. It's relative to the situation before the situation before and actually also right after the cessation of hostilities. And also another perspective is to look at it in terms of the demands of the people of Tigray. So, when you compare the current supply of humanitarian support to the situation before the declaration of humanitarian, the declaration of cessation of hostilities and also the period after that a little bit, it has slightly improved. But when you compare it to the demands of the people, remember, the huge demands for humanitarian support, the huge demands of Tigray for humanitarian support is caused by the terrible, deliberate blockade and also and overall atrocities committed by the allied forces of Abiy and Amhara and also the Eritrean forces. When you look at it, I was looking at reports of aid agencies. The blockade started on July 12, 2021, right after the government of the troops, the forces of Abiy government dragged out. They were driven out by the forces of the Tigray Development Forces, by the forces of the Tigray Defense Forces. The next strategy they adopted was to systematically, deliberately impose blockade on the people of Tigray, so that they would be self-starved, and after starvation they would submit. They would submit, kneel down, and accept Abiy, or otherwise they would also be at most, that was their interest, at most they would also be out of existence. So that has created, it's almost a year now. I'm talking about the blockade that started July 12th. It's almost a year as we speak. The aid agency estimates that 34,000 air trucks should have arrived at the moment. But actually, as of July 17, only 3,800 something have arrived. This is 11% of the demand. When you compare it to the demand, it's only 11%. They have met only 11% of the demand. It's a peanut. It's a very, very small. Looking at the extended demand, the extended time, the large demand that the people have because of the conflict that have gone through, the humanitarian access has not improved. That's point one. It's a very small one. By the way, we have the internally displaced people who are basically on monthly basis dependent on food aid. You can't take their help. You can't consider or can't say you are helping them by providing some food in some rounds. These people are fully dependent on aid. These are people that have migrated. These are people that have been displaced from west of Tigray and so on. Hundreds of thousands of people. That's not enough. Secondly, 11% of the food aid has arrived in Mekelle, in the capital city of Tigray. But aid agencies are not able to distribute it further because of a lack of fuel. They are not able to distribute it further to reach out majority of the people in need because of lack of fuel.
And despite
also,
all this,
not only
despite
that,
all this,
I've talked about the lack of fuel, the systematic effect of a lack of fuel. The lack of fuel has also stopped ground services in Mekelle airport. Some of the flights that were coming to Mekelle airport were also carrying medicine and some essential food supplies. They have stopped because the machines that were operating in the airport, that were unloading and carrying some of the stuff coming, are not able to operate because of a lack of fuel. And also, I just want to finalize the issue of lack of fuel. Even emergency hospital services in main hospitals in Tigray, they have stopped because of lack of fuel. Surgery operations need fuel. The extent of shortage of fuel is very, very detrimental to the extent that even surgery operations cannot take place in Tigray because they need power. And by the way, not many people mention it. Before I leave, before I talk outside the issue of fuel, there is massive deforestation in Tigray because people they do not have access to electricity, because people do not have access to fuel. They have to continue cutting trees. And Tigray was known for reforestation. Tigray was awarded for reforestation. Tigray was known for environmental degradation, rehabilitation. At this moment, it is also causing a lot of adverse impact on the environment because there is lack of fuel.
So my question is,
another point I want to add, cash. Look, we are talking about now humanitarian access. Cash. Aid agencies cannot distribute. And of course, they need labor. They cannot unload or offload aid if they don't have cash. They have no cash. There are no banking services. So, bringing in hundreds or thousands of tons of food and storing them in Mekelle is not an objective. The objective is to make sure that the food is accessible to people and the people can consume it and survive. They can survive. That's not happening. So the point I'm trying to make is the situation actually has not improved. Systematically, the people, the government of Ethiopia is systematically starving the people of Tigray. And it has two objectives. Actually, it has one objective: to starve the people of Tigray. Submission, or actually the Commissioner of Europe, Janez Lenarchish, has actually pointed this out very clearly in his report, and he has actually posted this in his tweet. It looks that the objective of the Ethiopian government is to starve the people of Tigray into submission, and perhaps also into out of existence.
Yeah. And yet the government of Ethiopia seems to be getting away with its position, despite all these problems that is inflicting on the people of Tigray. The government of Ethiopia seems to be going away with it. So you mentioned the EU. The EU, despite its professed declarations and objections to all these things, has not acted, in a significant way to stop all these, obstacles and deliberate, starvation of people to death. We can even see the recent, loans and grants that's being given to the government of Ethiopia, despite all these, violations of human rights and humanitarian law. How do you explain, isn't the government of Ethiopia, succeeding in getting its way?
Well, in relation to position of the European Union on the conflict in Tigray, I would honestly say that it is principled and it has been consistent. It is principled and consistent since the war started. By the way, the European Union had a series of deliberations on the issues in Tigray since the war started. And the relations between EU and Ethiopia are not same as they used to be before the war. The relations are different. Ethiopia is not getting the direct budget support it is to get before the war. It's not at all. The European Union has held, it has suspended the budget support it is to provide to Ethiopia. The relations are not as normal as they used to be before the war. The European Union has been discussing and has been trying to impose sanctions on the Ethiopian region because of the war that the Ethiopian regime has imposed on Tigray, because of the atrocities that it committed on the people of Tigray. What is the policy of the European Union on Tigray? First of all, as I told you, it does not have the relationship it used to have before the war. Now, the European Union is not providing direct budget support. The European Union used to provide hundreds of millions of euro every year to the government of Ethiopia. It has stopped this because of the war. And it has also set conditions. If set the conditions that the government of Ethiopia, if the relations between the EU and Ethiopia have to be normalized. But has actually set 3 criteria before it can normalize relations with Ethiopia and actually before it can provide direct budget support to Ethiopia. The first one is unfettered humanitarian access. The European Union is fully aware that humanitarian access is deliberately restricted to Tigray. So the European Union has been saying it has to be unfettered humanitarian access if EU is to normalize the relations with Ethiopia, or if it is to continue providing the red budget to Ethiopia. The second is accountability. And actually combined with this is the withdrawal of foreign forces. Actually, the withdrawal of Eritrean forces. And the third is ceasefire and political situations, political solution to the conflicts in Ethiopia. These are the 3 asks, as they call them, the 3 conditions that have to be met before the relations between EU and Ethiopia can be normalized. By the way, it was a policy. It has been there for a long time. It is consistent. And this is also something which is intact as we speak. In the recent Foreign Affairs Council of Europe, this position is intact. The High Representative, Vice President Joseph Borrell has also said in the stem. He said there are some improvements in humanitarian access, but they are not enough to normalize the relations. Humanitarian access has to be still less restricted. There is restriction. So there has to be more access in terms of supply of fuel, in terms of supply of fertilizers, which many of the people of Tigray are dependent on, but also in terms of starting basic services in Tigray, which brings us to the blockade we have been talking about. As we speak, telecom internet is not working, banking services are not working, transport services are not working, and actually many other government functions are not there. How can basic government services operate, or how can government services be provided where tens of thousands of civil servants are not paid their salaries? They are not being paid their salaries. The European Union is saying basic services to the public have to start before they can start considering normalizing their relations and also providing perhaps direct budget support to the government of Ethiopia. I would say that the European Union has been very principled. It has also consistent. It has not been changing since the conflict started.
But how do does it tally with the practice on the ground, with the reality on the ground? Yes, of course, they were principled, whatever they have been saying, consistent. But what have they done practically on the ground?
Well, also recently,
regardless of the budgetary support.
Yes. Also recently, as you remember, I was talking about what the High Representative Vice President Joseph Borrell stated after the Foreign Affairs Council meeting. But also, following that, Janice Lelarchich, the Commissioner of Humanitarian Support, Humanitarian Affairs of the European Commission, was in Mekelle. He was in Tigray. He witnessed the same. He understood the situation on ground, the demands of the people of Tigray. He also witnessed that the demands of the people of Tigray have not been met. He actually said the people of Tigray have suffered enough and this has to stop. So after even sending delegation of the European Union to the people of Tigray or to Tigray, it has been proved the same. The European Union continues still to maintain the policy that the blockade in Tigray has to stop. The humanitarian access, even including the provision of fuel and fertilizer. I forgot to mention this. Fertilizer, seeds, and pesticides and other agricultural input has to be provided. By the way, we are talking about the humanitarian situation on ground at the moment. But more importantly, we also have to start talking about the food security of the people of Tigray in the future. In 4 or 5 months, we know that the international community cannot continue providing us support. We have to depend on ourselves. So, if we don't provide, we know that 70 or 80 beyond % of the people of Tigray depend on agriculture and particularly on crop production. If you don't provide fertilizers, seeds, pesticides, then they will only be getting 50% of their production potential, which means that the people of Tigray will continue to be dependent on international support on this. The government of Tigray the government of Ethiopia is not providing fertilizer, it's not providing seeds, it's not providing pesticides, and so on and so on. This is systematically harming, systematically making sure that the people of Tigray kneel down and submit. And then the government of Ethiopia, in this case, Abiy and his allies, would achieve their political and military objectives. That is why people say it is a weapon. The famine is a weapon. It is a weapon. It is an instrument to achieve a political and economic objectives of the invaders.
And the international community is being criticized by some quarters as enabling this by being, by looking away. Even the European Union, despite all the, principles and stated or declared intentions that you just mentioned, has not decidedly stopped all these things. They are still going on. All these blockades, the siege is continuing. The external forces are still there. The Western Tigray is under occupation, and even some parts of, northwestern and eastern Tigray are under occupation by external forces. And there are those who criticize the European Union is not, strong on, pursuing this in spite of the declarations, and the speeches and the concerns, it's not enforcing what it is saying, simply because it's afraid of the greater evil of, the influx of refugees to Europe once, the gate is open. What do you say to that?
Yes, I'm not saying the European Union or the international community has done enough to stop the war in Tigray. I'm not saying it has done enough in terms of imposing sanctions on the perpetrators of atrocities in Tigray. The European Union, on the other hand, appreciate, I'm talking on behalf of the government of Tigray, appreciate in the sense that it has also taken the lead, it has taken the lead in terms of initiation of the establishment of the Independent Human Rights Commission that will investigate the atrocities and crimes committed in Tigray. That was, but in terms of our expectations as a representative of the government of Tigray, I don't think that I can't say the world has done enough. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in this war. Not only they've been directly killed by shootings and so on, they have also been killed because of lack of access to food, because of a lack of access to health services. And of course, we have been directly killed. We remember the situation in Aksum, the massacre in Aksum, in which hundreds of people, 700, 800 people were killed in one daylight by direct shootings of Abiy's forces, Eritrea's forces, and Amhara's forces. We have well documented. The world knows that there is the deliberate blockade in terms of access to food, in terms of electricity, in terms of telecom, in terms of transport. How would a certain country or city in the West react if it does not have access to telecom for 10 minutes, let alone for a whole year? For 10 minutes, that would be a major breaking news in the world. You wouldn't sleep, or you can't, you would really see a lot of uproars if there is a 10-minute interruption of internet access. Electric power. That would be very, very, very terrible. This is happening for a whole year in Tigray. For 8 or 9 or 10 million people are facing this blockade for a whole year. And this is deliberate. I don't think the world doesn't know this. The world knows this.
So just
I don't
one
think
last
the world is
question.
doing enough. I'm not saying the world is not doing enough.
So
The world
yeah,
is not doing enough.
just to take it from there, my last question. You said the world is not doing enough. What can the international community do that it did not do so far, that it has not done so far, to change the situation? And particularly your message to the European Union, which is your jurisdiction in Europe.
We like the position that the European Union has taken so far, although it is not enough.
So what can you do to change the situation?
European Union has to continue monitoring the actual situation on ground. The European Union has to press the Ethiopian region to break the siege, break the blockade, to create unfettered humanitarian access it has to press the Ethiopian region to resolve the conflict in Tigray, by the way, and the conflict in overall Ethiopia. I'm talking about Tigray. There is conflict in Oromia region, in the biggest region of the country. There is conflict in Benishangul, in another region. There is conflict in Amhara, in another region. I would hardly say there is area without conflict in Ethiopia. They have to press the region in Ethiopia to resolve its conflicts peacefully with its opponents.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Aklilu Hailemichael. I wish we were to have more time for this very interesting discussion, but we are limited by time now. I think I have to say goodbye here. Thank you very much for this very elaborate discussion.
Thank you very much, Mekelle. Thank you. I appreciate the presentation.
Thank you, viewers, for tuning in. Hope to meet you in another edition. Thank you.